Hey, it's Jazz at Red Panda Reads, and this is a vlog, woo, where you're going to come on an adventure with me as I look through all the books on my bookshelves that talk about sex, and let's see if they actually mention contraception or not. You know what? I'm not feeling hopeful. To be fair, I don't actually have that many books on my bookshelf at the moment since the move, getting rid of a lot of books, all that stuff that I've spoken about before. So there'll be quite a small number, slash I listen to a lot of books on audio and therefore I'm not going to be able to include those. For example, I just re-listened to The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, and there's a whole society there of people who don't realise that when a man and a woman have sex, there is a chance they can make a baby. But on a positive note, the male protagonist is chewing a herb to provide contraception. So like he's thought about this, like he never discusses it with the women before sleeping with them, but at least he is taking that initiative, though I still think there should be a two-way dialogue about contraception. The reason I'm doing this is I'm really passionate about contraception. I've got a background of medicine. I absolutely adored counselling patients on contraception, making sure that women were aware of their choices, what worked best for them, because I really felt, I don't know if it's different now, but when I grew up, I wasn't really taught about contraception as, I was taught use contraception so you don't get pregnant, but there wasn't much, and these are the different types, but there wasn't much emphasis on the importance of finding a contraception which is right for you, and that it's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. You may have to try multiple different types of contraception before it suits you. And I think it's just a really important thing that should be prevalent in books, because the more prevalent it is in books, whether it's just mentioned before people have intercourse, the more kind of more confident I think people can feel to be talk about it and start a dialogue and be like, what are our options? What suits me? And like a lot of my books are fantasy books, so I don't think we'll be finding the coil in many of these books, but it'd still be good to see that there's this recognition that if two people have sex and they don't want to have a baby, there's precautions that should be put into place, and it's not just up to the woman to do that. It should be the man and the woman talking about it and making the decision together, or whoever is in the relationship. So shall we begin? I'm going to start off by trying to find all the books that I think have sex in, which isn't many because I don't have many books at the moment, but I'll take you on the adventure. I've already complained about the contraception and the sexual relationship in this book, and it's going to pain me to do it in more detail. So, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books. Don't know if they all do have sex in. Some of them I think they do, but I can't quite remember. I think we might do a nice diagram as well, where we have contraception mentioned, contraception not, and then the names of the books. And hopefully you'll start a nice discussion. Ouch. Okay. Pills, coil, contraception. I mean, a condom. In med school, we had to learn the 12 steps to putting a condom on for an OSCE station. So it's all things like you need to check when you've got it, that it has the little that it's got a little stamp, you know, the Queen stamp with the lion and stuff that says this is safe to use, it is good quality and won't hopefully be faulty. But yeah, 12 steps. Okay. Here's my little contraception graph. So if the book does talk about contraception, I'll fill up this little test tube, and if not, I'll fill up the other little test tube. And there's all my pretty pictures. You can see I'm a budding artist, and we will take it from there. So I'm going to start looking at the first book, and this is okay, so I'm starting with The Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb, which is a fantasy book. It's the second in a series, in the Farseer series, and it basically follows a young guy called Fitz, who is born out of wedlock to one of the princes, and he ends up being kind of adopted into the kingdom, but is treated differently to the actual royal bloodline because he's a bastard. and he's got this kind of special ability where he can communicate with animals, which is really cool, and it kind of follows his life as he gets trained by the king to basically be the king's private assassin. So first book was phenomenal. Second, could we just have got rid of the romance plot? So let's see how the romance plot is. Oh dear God. So at this point they haven't slept together. They like each other, but basically they've been told that because she is a lowly servant and he is basically from a royal line, the consequences of them getting together could be dire. So that's why she's pushing him away, but he's like, no, I want this. And she even mentions pregnancy. So she says at this point that Fitz's uncle came to her and basically said she says, he warned me sternly that the king would not tolerate no more scandals. He demanded to know if I was with child. Of course, I was angry. I told him it was impossible, that I should be, that we had never. She then pauses. Perfect opportunity now to think, if we have sex, we could have a child and the consequences to it. Okay. And then they go on 2 pages later to get it on, and apparently Fitz had heard it'd been called a dance and it'd also been called a battle. Great. That is, yeah. Okay, so I can't find the section where Molly does talk about chewing leaves that can give her some contraceptive properties, but I'm going to put this in there. This book does not properly talk about contraception. In the first half, with all their sexual activities, there's no mention of it. Fitz doesn't consider it for such a long time. And as I've said, it should be a 2-way dialogue. And his complete disregard for our main female character to think that affects, like, the thing is, he is, despite being a princeling bastard, he is so damn privileged. He has a roof over his head. He has the money to be able to, like, do what he wants. He can go to parties. He can marry well if he wants. He has these amazing opportunities within the society he's brought up in. Even there's a lot of emphasis on, like, him being the disadvantaged one because he's not got the full royal blood. But whereas Molly, she is a daughter of a man who was struggled with alcoholism. She had to basically run a business on her own from when she was young. She was beaten when she was young. If she gets pregnant and they're not married, she will be shunned by this fantasy society. She will be basically potentially lose her business. She may not be able to feed herself or the baby. And Fitz won't have to deal with any of that. So for goodness sake, boy, consider it. So this is the first book, and I think it's absolutely atrocious how it handles contraception and how it only mentions it in a vague reference and that there's no consideration that a guy will actually think about it. So no, this is not a good book for contraception. So the next book I'm talking about is The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler, which is a book I read for a book club earlier this year before lockdown, and I really didn't like it. I gave it a 2-star read. It's supposed to be like the pioneer book for like kind of those murder mystery, edgy kind of detective vibe book, and I thought it was homophobic, sexist, and I found the murder plot pretty dry. But I read it, and I'm pretty sure there is a sex scene in this book. However, I'm pretty sure it is pretty damn old. So what, it was published in 1939. So I'm actually going to do some research to see what like our contraception options were in 1939. Okay, so I don't actually think this book had any sex in it. It had potential sex, and then the detective was like, tell me more about this mystery. And she was like, oh, you're just using me then. And he was like, yeah. And I think it's quite interesting because some people, reading more about this book, some people have said that it's actually great that the women in this book are able to express their sexuality, that they're able to flirt back and it's not considered a negative thing. And I think the reason that I found it so uncomfortable to read this book is because it is very outdated. Kind of, I do like the fact that women have a voice, but how they're portrayed, like all the women, it's all about their appearance, their looks, their sexual allure, compared to the men who are kind of like cool and, you know, sophisticated. They're just so objectified, and that's what I found so uncomfortable around reading this book. And I think that's very much towards the time period. And so I've just been looking up kind of what contraception options would our women have had during this time period. And I've just got a web page up here, and it's fascinating. So I did not realise that the first intrauterine device, for example, a coil, was developed in 1909, and it was made of silkworm gut. So it doesn't tell me here how effective it was or anything. I'm not convinced how much it was, but I did not really realise how early kind of the idea of a coil was made. So going back to the women in this book, so the choices they would have had, sorry, I just find this so interesting, is so there was a more effective IUD, so intrauterine device, that was created. They would have had options of kind of diaphragms, and female condoms were available at this point. Condoms were available, no hormone options at that point, whereas if we look at it now, excluding kind of condoms, there is only one contraceptive which is kind of used, which isn't hormonal, if you're looking for kind of more long-acting contraceptions, which is the copper coil. So if you don't want hormones in your contraception devices and you don't want to use condoms, and you've made sure that the person that you're sleeping with does not have a sexually transmitted disease, and that you yourself do not have a sexually transmitted disease, then you have one option, which is the copper coil. No emergency contraception at that point when this book was written, no progesterone only pills, no injection, no implant. Oh my god. But you could get sterilised. Cool. Okay, so that's book number 2. Raymond Chandler's Big Sleep. I will not be watching the films. I will probably not be reading any more of his books. I'm doing the mandatory tea pour and vlog videos because I think it's funny. Okay, I've moved on to Procession of the Dead by D.B. Shan, which is a pseudonym for Darren Shan, which I think is a pseudonym for another name. But this is the first adult novel of Darren Shan's I've read, and I very much remember there was a sex scene in this book, and I opened the page, and the first thing I saw was "we rutted like cats." So I was like, cool, I'm on the right page. So this is a noir, very fast paced, lots of things going on, but quite weird. And in this scene, our main character, who's trying to work out why people keep on going missing and no one seems to remember that these people exist. He's going up the stairs and then he sees a woman who shouldn't be on the stairs, and then they have sex. And there is not anything to do with contraception in this. It's like a page of sexiness on the stairs, and then it's over, and there's no reference to contraception. Like, how hard would it be to say, I don't know, I pulled out a condom and put it on? And if we can just normalise the fact that during sex people sometimes need to use contraception, that would be great. And it is possible that our female character here is on some long-term contraception, so she's not concerned, but it'd just be nice to acknowledge it in some way. By not acknowledging it, then we're not talking about it. I also brought the fifth season, which is a really good book, but then I remembered that our main character is supposed to be having sex on a regular basis in order to have children, so contraception is not mentioned in this. This book I couldn't really remember, but I've just read a little bit of it, and our protagonist can't have children. So that's out of it. There was also another book that I read years back, which was I can't remember what the series was called, but it's The Magician's Guild, The Novice, and The Black Magician by Trudi Canavan. I might have got that last one wrong. But that series I absolutely loved. It follows a young woman named Sonia who turns out she has innate magical abilities, and in the first book she's basically being hunted down by the magicians of the university who want to find out who used magic, who shouldn't be. And then the story follows her time, basically follows her. And without giving kind of any spoilers away, there is someone in this book who gets pregnant. What one of the characters says is her partner assumed that she knew what magical means to protect herself from getting pregnant. Again, the assumption that it is the woman's responsibility and not the man to check that a pregnancy doesn't happen if you don't want it, which is infuriating. Hey, it's Future Jazz here. I just want to add that the reason the character wasn't educated in contraception was that it was assumed that she wouldn't need it, and that seems ridiculous, but things like this happen. So I've read about in the past how students with disabilities have actually been taken out of sex ed classes with the assumption that they wouldn't be having sex, which is just ridiculous. And so I'm really hoping that that is changing, and that regardless of what disability you have or kind of your upbringing, you get to be educated in contraception. In Flatshare, I'm really interested to listen to that back and be, oh, I could listen to it back. Okay, so let's do Flatshare, because I can listen to that because I think whereabouts the sex scene is. So there's Flatshare was probably my favourite romance I read this year. It follows basically two individuals, can't remember the name off the top of their head, but the top of my head, and they're basically living in the same flat, sharing a bed in London because of prices, but they never see each other because one of them is working during the day, and one of them is working during the night. So they basically share this bed but never meet, and they've never met each other, and they start to communicate using post-it notes, and then they fall for each other. And the reason I love this book is it has a lot of it talks about so our main character, the main woman, she's come out of a very toxic relationship in the past, and in the beginning she doesn't see that past relationship as emotionally abusive, and as the story kind of carries on she starts to realise this. So I'm going to go and see what happens during those sex scenes. Okay, let's start with the positive. So I now really want to listen to Flatshare again. It has some beautiful scenes where they talk about consent prior to sleeping with each other, which was fabulous. Was contraception mentioned? No. I know that every book doesn't need to be like, oh, this girl is on this contraception which has these properties and which cause these effects on her mood, on her weight, on her appetite. But when there are sex scenes, can we get rid of these kind of Hollywood, kind of seamless, romantic, steamy images of sex and be like, it doesn't have to be this perfect thing to be good, and contraception shouldn't be hidden, it should be something talked about. You don't need to disguise the fact that a condom was put on. And it frustrates me. It really frustrates me that it seems so far in the books. To be fair, 3 of the books I've chosen, the woman is trying to get pregnant, and therefore are probably not relevant. But basically, in none of these books, with the exception of The Name of the Wind, which I'll talk about, yes, it does mention contraception, even if it's a bit late. My graph. So, there must be more books where contraception is mentioned. So from this point on, what I'm going to do is every book that I read that has a sex scene in, I'm going to have a look to see if there is any mention whatsoever about contraception. And then hopefully at the kind of end of next year or earlier, depending how many books I read, I want to do a more informed video looking at the books I read over the year and how contraception is represented in those books. I would love your opinion of this. If there's any books you've read that are like, bam, mentions contraception in a really realistic and truthful way. I'm also just interested in like different types of contraception being talked about in books. And I'm really pro normalizing it, starting discussions, finding like what's best for you as an individual, because like it really does affect you. So I think to finish, what I will say is I would like there to be more mention of contraception within books. So of course I've got a very small sample, but just kind of looking back, I can't remember that many books that I've read that's discussed it, and that might be because I've gone down the more fantasy route. So but I'd still expect there to be some form of contraceptive, whether that's some kind of strange weird herbal remedy that people take, because I don't, if you look, for as long as we've lived, women have been trying to find ways to not get pregnant. So it's not like this is a new thing, and I think it translates into whatever setting people are having sex, regarding if it's a fantasy world or not. And I don't even care if they're like, oh, magic, and it's fine. But it's just, I'd like something there. So that could be why, because it's fantasy. Fantasy is a pretty male-dominated genre as well. So it's whether they don't have as much knowledge about contraception as women do. However, that needs to be changed, because I think it's just as important that men are aware of all the different contraceptions and the side effects. I've got 3 non-fiction books to read that I've started reading and yet to finish, which I need to finish by the end of the month. So I should probably stop filming, editing this so it can get out for tomorrow, and then take it from there. But I hope you enjoyed my contraception/birth control vlog. And I'll hopefully do something once I have more books and more sources, and actually have the time when I'm reading it to be like, this is where something's mentioned. And if any of these books I've talked about, it does mention contraception and I've just massively missed it, please let me know.